"You're being selfish, Jake. A real husband would support his wife's dreams," Sarah snapped, throwing me a $50,000 bill. She never expected I'd already locked the accounts and prepared for divorce. My wife of 8 years was standing in our kitchen, designer purse clutched in her manicured hands, expecting me to clean up another financial mess. Sarah had always been beautiful, confident, and completely convinced that my engineering salary existed solely to fund her lifestyle. What she didn't know was that I'd been documenting every lie, every hidden purchase, every manipulative conversation for the past 6 months. The credit card statement in my hand showed charges I'd never seen before. Luxury spa treatments, expensive dinners at restaurants I'd never been to, hotel stays in the city when she claimed to be visiting her sister. But it was the recurring charges to something called prestige personal training that made my blood run cold. 3 times a week, $200 per session, for the past 4 months. "Jake, you're overreacting," Sarah said, her voice taking on that sweet, condescending tone she used when she wanted something. "It's just a rough month. You know how expenses add up." I'd heard this speech before, many times. Sarah had a gift for making her financial irresponsibility sound like a minor inconvenience that any loving husband would handle without question. For years, I'd believed her. I'd worked overtime, taken on extra projects, even borrowed against my 401k to cover her rough months. But 6 months ago, something changed. Sarah had started working late more often, taking mysterious phone calls in the next room, and becoming increasingly critical of everything I did. She'd complain that I didn't make enough money, that I was boring, that I didn't understand her needs. The woman who used to greet me at the door with a smile now barely looked up from her phone when I came home. That's when I started paying attention, really paying attention. Our marriage had started like a fairy tale. I met Sarah at a company barbecue where she was working as a caterer. She was 22, fresh out of college, and had this infectious laugh that made everyone around her smile. I was 25, 3 years into my engineering career and completely smitten. Sarah was everything I thought I wanted in a partner: beautiful, social, and ambitious. The first year of our relationship was perfect. Sarah would surprise me with home-cooked meals, plan romantic weekend getaways, and make me feel like the luckiest man alive. She talked about her dreams of opening her own catering business, and I was eager to support her. When she suggested we move in together, I didn't hesitate. That's when the financial request started, small at first. Sarah needed money for professional cooking classes, then she needed equipment for her catering business. Then she needed a more reliable car to transport food to events. Each request came with a business plan, a timeline, and promises that she'd pay me back once her business took off. I believed her because I loved her. And because Sarah had a way of making her dreams sound so reasonable, so achievable. She'd show me spreadsheets of projected earnings, testimonials from satisfied clients, and plans for expansion. It all looked legitimate, and I wanted to be the supportive boyfriend who helped his girlfriend achieve her goals. When we got married 2 years later, Sarah's catering business was still struggling. She blamed the economy, the competition, the difficulty of breaking into the industry. I suggested she might want to consider a more stable job while building her business on the side, but Sarah was insulted by the suggestion. "You don't believe in me," she'd say, tears forming in her eyes. "I thought you understood my dreams." So I kept supporting her financially while she pursued her catering business. I paid the rent, the utilities, the groceries, and the insurance while Sarah's income remained sporadic at best. When she did get catering gigs, the money seemed to disappear quickly on business expenses that I never quite understood. By our 3rd year of marriage, Sarah had largely abandoned the catering business. She claimed the stress was affecting her health, and she needed to focus on her wellness. That's when she started spending money on yoga classes, meditation retreats, and organic food. She got a part-time job at an upscale boutique, but her income barely covered her personal expenses. I didn't mind supporting Sarah financially. I made good money as an engineer, and I believed marriage was about partnership. If Sarah needed time to figure out her career path, I was happy to provide that stability. What I didn't realize was that Sarah had stopped seeing our relationship as a partnership and started seeing it as a business arrangement where I was the sole investor. The first thing I noticed was the mileage on her car. Sarah claimed she was driving to her sister's house in the suburbs twice a week, but the odometer showed she was putting on way more miles than that trip would require. When I casually asked about her visits, she'd get defensive and change the subject. "Why are you tracking my mileage?" she'd snap. "Don't you trust me?" The question caught me off guard because I'd never thought about whether I trusted Sarah. Trust had always been the foundation of our relationship, but her defensive reaction made me realize that maybe I should be paying more attention. Then there were the clothes. Sarah had always been fashionable, but suddenly she was wearing outfits I'd never seen before. Expensive outfits. When I asked where they came from, she'd claim they were gifts from her sister or that she'd had them for years. But the tags were still on some of them, hidden in the back where she thought I wouldn't notice. One evening, I found a receipt in Sarah's purse while looking for my car keys. It was for a $400 dress from a boutique I'd never heard of. When I asked her about it, she claimed it was a work expense. "I need to look professional at the boutique," she said. "Image is everything in retail." But Sarah worked at a casual clothing store, not a high-end fashion boutique. The dress she'd bought was formal evening wear, not something she'd ever wear to work. When I pointed this out, she got angry. "You're being controlling," she said. "I can't believe you're going through my purse and questioning my purchases." The phone calls were the final straw. Sarah would step outside or go to the bathroom whenever her phone rang, speaking in hushed tones that I couldn't quite make out. One night, I heard her laughing in a way she hadn't laughed with me in months. When she came back inside, I asked who she'd been talking to. "Just my trainer," she said casually. "He was telling me about this new workout routine." That's when I knew something was seriously wrong. Sarah had never mentioned having a trainer before. She'd always complained about going to the gym, claiming she preferred yoga classes or walking. She'd never shown any interest in intensive fitness training, and she'd certainly never mentioned paying for a personal trainer. But suddenly she had a trainer who called her at 9 p.m. to discuss workout routines. A trainer who made her laugh in a way that I, her husband, couldn't anymore. I started doing my own research. The prestige personal training charges led me to an upscale gym across town, the kind of place that catered to wealthy professionals and bored housewives. I drove by one afternoon and saw Sarah's car in the parking lot. But instead of going inside, she was sitting in the passenger seat of a black BMW, talking animatedly with a man I didn't recognize. The man was everything I wasn't. Tall, muscular, with the kind of easy confidence that came from never having to worry about money. He was wearing expensive workout clothes and a watch that probably cost more than my car. As I watched from across the street, he leaned over and kissed my wife. I sat in my car for 20 minutes after they drove away, trying to process what I'd just seen. 8 years of marriage, and Sarah was cheating on me with her personal trainer. But it wasn't just the affair that hurt. It was the realization that I'd been funding it. Every credit card payment, every time I'd covered her expenses, every dollar I'd given her for her fitness journey had been paying for her to betray me. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed next to Sarah, watching her peaceful face in the moonlight, wondering how long this had been going on. How many lies had she told me? How much money had she spent on this other man? How many times had she come home from being with him and kissed me with the same lips? The next morning, Sarah was unusually affectionate. She made me breakfast, kissed me goodbye, and told me she loved me. But all I could think about was what I'd seen the day before. Every gesture felt like another lie, another manipulation. That's when I decided to start documenting everything. I opened a separate bank account that Sarah didn't know about and began redirecting part of my paycheck there. I made copies of all our financial records, credit card statements, and bank records. I installed a GPS tracker on her car and started recording our conversations. What I discovered over the next few months was worse than I'd imagined. Sarah wasn't just having an affair. She was systematically draining our finances to support a lifestyle with her trainer that she could never afford on her part-time job at the boutique. The GPS tracker showed that Sarah was visiting Marcus, her trainer, almost every day. Sometimes she'd go to his apartment. Sometimes they'd meet at expensive hotels. Sometimes they'd go shopping together at stores I could never afford, and I was paying for all of it. The hotel charges were for afternoon encounters when I was at work. The expensive dinners were dates I was unknowingly paying for. The designer clothes were gifts she was buying for herself to impress him. Even the fitness equipment she claimed to need was actually lingerie and jewelry she was purchasing for their relationship. But the most devastating discovery came when I found text messages she'd forgotten to delete. Sarah had been complaining to Marcus about me, calling me boring and pathetic. She'd told him that I was too stupid to notice what was happening, and that she was planning to divorce me once she figured out how to get the maximum settlement. "Jake makes good money, but he's so naive," one message read. "He'll give me whatever I ask for if I cry a little. I just need to be patient until I can get half of everything." Another message was even worse. "Don't worry about the money, baby. My husband is like a walking ATM. He'll keep paying for everything while I figure out how to leave him with nothing." Reading those messages felt like being punched in the stomach. The woman I'd loved, the woman I'd worked 60-hour weeks to support, the woman I'd sacrificed my own dreams for, saw me as nothing more than a source of income. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was actively planning to destroy me financially. There were dozens of messages between Sarah and Marcus, spanning several months. They talked about their future together, about the trips they wanted to take, about the house they wanted to buy. All funded by my salary, of course. Sarah had promised Marcus that once she divorced me, she'd have enough money to support both of them in the lifestyle they wanted. Marcus wasn't just a passive participant in this scheme. He was actively encouraging Sarah to take more money from me. He'd suggest expensive gifts he wanted, restaurants he wanted to try, trips he wanted to take, and Sarah would find ways to get the money from me to pay for them. "Tell him you need money for a business course," Marcus had texted. "Or say you want to take a cooking class. He's stupid enough to believe anything." They were both laughing at me, treating me like a fool who existed solely to fund their relationship. The worst part was that they were right. I had been naive. I had believed everything Sarah told me. I had trusted her completely while she was systematically betraying me. But that was about to change. I started by consulting a divorce attorney, a sharp woman named Margaret Chen who specialized in cases involving financial fraud. When I showed her the evidence I'd gathered, her eyes widened. "Your wife has been committing financial adultery," she said bluntly. "She's been using marital assets to fund an extramarital affair. In this state, that's considered dissipation of marital assets, and it can significantly impact the division of property." Margaret explained that Sarah's actions went beyond simple infidelity. By using our joint credit cards and bank accounts to pay for her affair, she had committed fraud. The money she'd spent on Marcus could be recovered, and it would be deducted from any settlement she might receive in the divorce. But Margaret also warned me that proving financial adultery required extensive documentation. I needed to show exactly where every dollar had gone, and I needed to prove that Sarah had spent the money on her affair rather than on legitimate marital expenses. Fortunately, I had been documenting everything. I had GPS records showing Sarah's movements, credit card statements showing her purchases, and text messages proving her intent to defraud me. I had hotel receipts, restaurant bills, and shopping receipts that clearly showed Sarah was spending money on another man. Margaret was impressed by the thoroughness of my documentation. "Most people don't have this level of evidence," she said. "Your wife is going to have a very difficult time explaining these expenses." But I wanted more than just legal victory. I wanted Sarah to face the consequences of her betrayal in a way that would make her understand exactly what she'd done. I wanted her to experience the same humiliation and betrayal that I'd felt when I discovered her affair. The opportunity came when Sarah announced that she wanted to throw a party for her 30th birthday. She'd been planning it for weeks, inviting all our friends, her family, and her coworkers. She wanted to rent out a private room at an expensive restaurant, hire a DJ, and spare no expense. "It's my milestone birthday, Jake," she said, using that manipulative tone again. "I want it to be special. You understand, right?" I told her I understood completely. What she didn't know was that I'd already hired a private investigator to get photographic evidence of her affair. I had bank records showing exactly where every dollar had gone. I had recordings of her conversations where she'd admitted to using me for money. And I had a plan. The week before the party, I made copies of all the evidence and prepared a presentation. I contacted a process server to have divorce papers ready. I also reached out to several of Sarah's friends and family members, asking them to arrive early to the party because I had a special surprise planned. The night of Sarah's birthday party, I stood up to give a toast. Our friends and family were all there, about 50 people total, including Sarah's parents, her sister, her coworkers from the boutique, and several of our mutual friends. Sarah was glowing, wearing a new dress that had cost $800 according to the credit card statement. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," I began, raising my glass. "Sarah means the world to me, and I wanted to make sure her special day was perfect." Sarah smiled and blew me a kiss from across the room. She had no idea what was coming. "I also want to thank Sarah for teaching me some valuable lessons about trust and honesty in marriage," I continued. "For example, I learned that when your wife says she's going to visit her sister twice a week, she might actually be visiting her personal trainer instead." The room went quiet. Sarah's smile faltered. "I learned that Prestige Personal Training charges $200 per session, but that's not actually for fitness training. It's for hotel rooms and dinners with a man named Marcus who drives a black BMW." Sarah's face went white. Her mother gasped. Her sister looked confused. "I learned that when your wife asks for money for her fitness journey, she might actually be using it to buy lingerie for another man. And I learned that when she says she loves you, she might actually be texting her boyfriend about how naive and pathetic you are." I pulled out my phone and began reading directly from the text messages I'd screenshot. "Jake makes good money, but he's so naive. He'll give me whatever I ask for if I cry a little." Sarah stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "Jake, stop, you're embarrassing yourself." "Am I?" I continued reading. "Don't worry about the money, baby. My husband is like a walking ATM. He'll keep paying for everything while I figure out how to leave him with nothing." The room was dead silent now. Sarah's father looked like he wanted to disappear. Her mother was staring at Sarah with a mixture of shock and disappointment. Her coworkers were whispering among themselves, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "So here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Tomorrow morning, I'm filing for divorce. I'm also filing charges for credit card fraud and dissipation of marital assets. Sarah has spent over $75,000 of our money funding her affair over the past year, and I have documentation of every transaction." Sarah finally found her voice. "You can't do this. You're humiliating me in front of everyone." "You humiliated yourself," I replied. "I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth about who you really are." I turned to address the room. "I want to apologize to everyone for having to witness this. I know this isn't how anyone expected the evening to go, but I thought Sarah's friends and family should know what kind of person she really is before they continue supporting her lies." At that moment, the process server I'd hired walked into the restaurant. "Sarah Martinez?" he asked. Sarah nodded, still in shock. "You've been served," he said, handing her the divorce papers. With that, I walked out of the restaurant, leaving Sarah standing in front of 50 people who now knew exactly what she'd done. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Within hours, word of Sarah's betrayal had spread throughout our social circle. Her friends were calling me, asking if what I'd said was true. Her family was demanding explanations. Her coworkers were gossiping about the scandal. Sarah tried to do damage control, claiming that I'd exaggerated everything and that she was the victim of an abusive marriage. But the evidence was overwhelming, and people weren't buying her story. When her sister asked to see the text messages I'd read at the party, Sarah couldn't provide any explanation that made sense. The legal proceedings moved quickly. Margaret Chen was ruthless in her pursuit of justice. She subpoenaed Sarah's phone records, bank statements, and credit card records. She deposed Marcus, the personal trainer, who initially tried to deny the affair but eventually admitted under oath that Sarah had been paying for their relationship with money she'd taken from our joint accounts. Marcus's deposition was particularly damaging to Sarah's case. He admitted that Sarah had told him she was planning to divorce me and that she'd promised to support him financially once she got her settlement. He also admitted that he'd encouraged Sarah to take more money from me, knowing that she was using marital funds to pay for their relationship. "Did you know that Mrs. Martinez was married when you began your relationship with her?" Margaret asked during the deposition. "Yes," Marcus replied reluctantly, And did you know that she was using her husband's money to pay for your dates, gifts, and hotel rooms? Marcus shifted uncomfortably. She said it was her money too, but you knew she didn't have a job that could support the lifestyle you were living together. I guess I didn't think about it. Did you ever suggest that Mrs. Martinez should be honest with her husband about your relationship? No. Did you ever suggest that she should stop using his money to pay for your relationship? No. In fact, didn't you encourage her to take more money from her husband so you could live a more expensive lifestyle? Marcus looked defeated. Yes. Sarah tried to fight back, hiring her own attorney and claiming that I was being vindictive. She argued that she deserved half of our assets because she'd been a supportive wife for 8 years. She claimed that her affair was a result of emotional neglect on my part, and that she shouldn't be penalized for seeking happiness elsewhere. But her attorney quickly realized that Sarah's case was hopeless. The evidence against her was overwhelming, and her actions constituted clear financial fraud. Sarah had used marital assets to fund an extramarital affair, which was illegal in our state. She'd also forged my signature on several credit card applications, which was a felony. The judge was not sympathetic to Sarah's situation. When she tried to claim that she deserved half of our assets because she'd been a supportive wife, the judge reminded her that supportive wives don't typically steal money to fund affairs with other men. Mrs. Martinez, the judge said during one hearing, you have systematically defrauded your husband for over a year. You have used his income to fund an extramarital affair while lying to him about your activities. You have forged his signature on financial documents and have shown no remorse for your actions. This court will not reward such behavior. The financial accounting was devastating for Sarah. Margaret's forensic accountant had traced every dollar Sarah had spent on her affair. The total came to $87,000 over 18 months. This included hotel rooms, restaurant meals, gifts, clothing, jewelry, and even a vacation to Hawaii that Sarah had claimed was a business trip. Sarah was ordered to pay restitution for the money she'd stolen, plus interest and legal fees. The total amount came to over $120,000. She was also required to take full responsibility for all the debt she'd accumulated during the affair, including credit cards she'd opened in my name without my knowledge. The judge awarded me the house, both cars, and the majority of our savings. Sarah walked away with nothing but her personal belongings and a mountain of debt. She was also given a criminal record for credit card fraud and forgery. But the real justice came from the social consequences. Word of Sarah's betrayal spread quickly through our community. Her friends stopped calling. Her family was embarrassed and ashamed. She lost her job at the boutique when the owner learned about the fraud charges and didn't want the negative publicity associated with employing her. Sarah's mother called me a few weeks after the divorce was finalized. She was crying as she apologized for her daughter's behavior. I raised her better than this, she said. I don't know what happened to her, but what she did to you was unforgivable. Sarah's sister also reached out, expressing her shock and disappointment. I can't believe she was lying to everyone, she said. All those times she said she was visiting me, she was actually with that trainer. I feel like I don't even know my own sister anymore. Even some of Sarah's friends from the boutique contacted me to apologize. They'd been hearing Sarah's version of events for months, where she portrayed me as a controlling and neglectful husband. Learning the truth about her affair and financial fraud completely changed their perspective. We had no idea, one of them told me. Sarah always made it sound like you were the problem in the marriage. We never imagined she was stealing from you to pay for an affair. Marcus, the personal trainer, also faced consequences. Word of his involvement in the affair spread through the fitness community, and several of his clients dropped him. The gym where he worked was embarrassed by the scandal and eventually let him go. His reputation as a professional was destroyed, and he struggled to find new clients. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Sarah at the grocery store. She looked tired and worn down, her designer clothes replaced with discount store outfits. She was using food stamps to pay for her groceries, a far cry from the expensive organic food she used to buy. She tried to avoid me, but I approached her anyway. "How are you doing, Sarah?" I asked, genuinely curious. She looked at me with a mixture of anger and defeat. "You destroyed my life, Jake. Was it worth it?" "I didn't destroy your life," I replied calmly. You destroyed it yourself. I just made sure you faced the consequences of your choices." She started to say something else, but I walked away. I had nothing more to say to her. Later, I learned that Sarah had been forced to move in with her parents after losing her apartment. She couldn't find steady employment because of her criminal record, and the debt she owed me was garnishing what little income she could earn from temporary jobs. Marcus had also fallen on hard times. Without his job at the upscale gym, he'd been forced to take a position at a budget fitness center for a fraction of his previous salary. The expensive lifestyle he'd enjoyed with Sarah was gone, and he was struggling to make ends meet. As I drove home that day, I reflected on everything that had happened. The betrayal had been devastating, but it had also taught me valuable lessons about trust, self-respect, and the importance of standing up for yourself. I'd spent years enabling Sarah's behavior, making excuses for her selfishness, and believing that love meant accepting whatever treatment she gave me. Now I understood that real love requires mutual respect, honesty, and commitment. Sarah had never loved me. She'd loved what I could provide for her. And when I stopped being useful to her, she'd planned to discard me like a broken ATM. The house felt peaceful now, without the constant tension of wondering what Sarah was really doing or how much money she was spending. I'd started dating again, taking my time to find someone who valued me for who I was, not what I could give them. I'd also learned to set boundaries and trust my instincts. The red flags had been there with Sarah, but I'd ignored them because I wanted to believe in our relationship. Now I knew that love without trust and respect isn't love at all. The last I heard, Sarah was working at a call center for minimum wage and still living with her parents. Marcus had moved to another state, trying to rebuild his career and reputation. Their dreams of a luxurious lifestyle funded by my money had evaporated along with their relationship. Sometimes people ask me if I regret exposing Sarah so publicly. They think I should have handled it privately, that humiliating her in front of everyone was too harsh. But I don't regret it for a second. Sarah had been humiliating me privately for months, lying to my face while stealing my money to fund her betrayal. She'd planned to humiliate me publicly during the divorce, painting me as a controlling husband who didn't understand her needs. Instead, everyone learned the truth about who Sarah really was. And that truth was the most powerful weapon I could have used against her lies. The judge's final words at our divorce hearing still echo in my mind. Marriage is a partnership built on trust and mutual respect. When one partner systematically betrays that trust for personal gain, they forfeit their right to the benefits of that partnership. Sarah had forfeited everything through her own choices. And now she was living with the consequences of those choices, just as I was living with the freedom that came from finally standing up for myself. Justice had been served, and it was exactly what she deserved.